Welcome everybody, and welcome Paul live from Elevate IT from Washington State. How's it going today, Paul?
Hi, Danish. Going well in Washington State.
Yeah, like we had a chat, I think a week ago or something when we had a peer group, and you were talking about cybersecurity as a productivity issue, and it gave me like a big epiphany that yes, it's not really security is not a risk type of problem for me, but it's like how to stay secure with and keeping my productivity. And can you just tell us a little bit about like how you get to this realization and what actually the problem? Because I think most people see this cybersecurity more as a compliance type of thing. Yeah, I have to comply with these standards, NIST. ISO, whatever. We have to make sure that our vendors are safe, our data safe. But somehow we don't really see that is like it's crippling us day in, day out, and we can't actually get things done because of all these security madness.
Right, and because I think a big part of that, Danish, is that we work with data. And so when we think about security, computer security, we think about security as bits and bytes of data that we don't understand. Or we think about security as something that I need to do in my computer that I don't understand. And we have this feeling inside us that we're not doing it right, or that if not everybody's doing it right, or if we're not at a certain level, that we're going to be hacked. And then we hear horror stories, Target, or we hear horror stories from Capital One. We're actively at Danish Washington State University. I'm a professor there. They got hacked. My information was hacked from there. And now I'm on this credit monitoring. So every month I get this notification about the risk that's involved with cybersecurity. And so we look at this and we just get so concerned with something that we know such little about that we sort of lock up, right? We want to try to force it into areas of our lives in a way that's unnatural, and in a way that we wouldn't normally do with any other risk avoidance or any other security, because it's this foreign cyber animal and it lives sort of on the side. And so hopefully today what we can talk about is that if instead we think about how to ingrain security into our productivity into our security in the way that we're normally used to doing it, right? We're normally used to risk avoidance. We're normally used to being very productive. We hop in a car, Danish, and the first thing we do, we put on our seatbelt. Clockwork. We don't even think about it because we've ingrained that security into our normal productivity. And we don't stop. We don't think, hey, let's not take the car today, Danish, because the seatbelt thing, it's such a hassle. We'll just walk, right? But with this type of security, IT security, because it is so abstract, because it is something that we feel like is above where we live, that we think that it has to get in our way. We think we have to work around it. And so we spend a lot of our lives doing things that sort of counteract security because we're not rethinking the way we use security in our lives.
Paul, let me interrupt you. I have a really vivid example for that. Our family was like having a vacation and our bikes were stolen. Like 3 of the family, bicycles were stolen in the middle of town. Cut the wire and run with a bicycle. So before that, I knew that I'm taking some risk because I used like a big long, wire, which was like supposed to be okay, in this type of environment. I didn't use the U-locks where you have to lock all the bikes separately, which is harder to cut. They can cut it, but they are not going to do that in the middle of the town kind of thing. So I took like a risk, like, all right, convenience, one big wire, one lock, rather 6 locks. Now I have the 6 locks, but I know what's the, a risk I'm taking because it's real. I know to lock the door. I know to lock the fence. I know to use the smoke detector because this is real. What I don't know, whether I do anything on IT in my computer everywhere and I'm safe. And I don't know. That's the biggest concern I have, is that I don't want to listen to who to actually have best practices. So what you have or what you do with your clients to make sure that's solved some way, because it's just craziness, Paul, really.
That's right. That's right. And if we look at it, I'm going to pull out a couple of the examples that you used there, right? We think about locking our doors and our windows in our home. It's not something that During the daytime, I lock my doors and windows. And in fact, today it's a gorgeous day in Washington State. I leave them open. I enjoy the breeze, but I still lock my doors when I leave. And it's not something that I question. But on things like our automobile and a few of these other things, we have looked at ways to make our ability to gain security while also increasing our productivity. For example, on my car now, Danish, I paid the extra feature so that when I walk up and grab the handle, the door automatically unlocks so long as the key is in my pocket, right? So I made that investment in that ease. That doesn't mean that the car automatically locks when I get out of it and close it. I still have to remember to lock the car, right? And this is a piece of productivity that I am giving up, that I am focused on making sure that my vehicle is locked, and that when I walk away, it's not available to people to hop into and do what they will inside. But I guess, again, when I'm working with my clients, though, what we're looking to achieve is to figure out how we can, one, find a baseline security that fits our risk avoidance personality. To your point with the bicycles, hey, look, my bicycle that I drive isn't nearly as expensive as the bicycles that you ride. So a long chain is exactly what I'm going to use, because I just don't have the time or the effort to put up with a U-bolt. And if I do have a hardened criminal that's going to steal my bicycle, let him take it. But I've identified that as the risk avoidance profile that I want. And I use that as I move forward to maintain the productivity. The other piece that, Danish, is that I've got a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old with me. And the idea that I'm going to buckle up 4 different vehicles with U-bolts while my 6 and 9-year-old wander into the street introduces another level of risk that I am introducing, because my attention isn't on the 6 and 9-year-old and it's on 4 different U-bolts. So instead, I'm going to pick the easy one and then pay more attention to my children to identify sort of how these risks overlap. But I think at the end of the day, the goal is to focus on maintaining productivity in a way that has a nod to risk and that isn't in spite of risk. And I reach back into the Texas saying there. There's a Texas saying that says, keep your saddle oiled and your gun greased. With the idea being that your saddle's oiled and ready to go, it's maintained for productivity, but your gun is greased. You're not ignoring the fact that security is necessary out on the range. And so it's, again, with a nod to this idea that security side by side with productivity has been something that we have worked on diligently as people when we were running cattle, all the way to now when we're sitting behind our computer. And if we decouple them, right, if we make them against each other, that's where we get ourselves in trouble. Instead, we got to think about how they go together. How do we hop in our car and put on a seatbelt? How do we keep our saddle oiled and our gun greased?
Paul, I love your analogies and I love the stories behind that, because I do believe that's what I can understand. I'm not a Texan boy, but I'm a village guy. I don't need complexity. I understand simple terms, simple analogies. And you put together like a 5 strategy for productivity, for security. And I would like to go through one by one, because I do believe these are really game changer, at least for me, to understand not just the big concepts, but actually how to think about security, how to make wise decisions, and what to do, what to act. It's really comes there. So what is your first productivity strategy?
Well, what you're going to like about these, Danish, and I appreciate you introducing these, they're all grounded in that good, plain Texas mentality. Now, I'm from Washington, but I have that good, plain Texas, just get her done mentality that applies to security and productivity, even outside of the digital sphere, right? So as I go through these, you could also keep in mind, hey, how does this apply to the security of my house? How does this apply to the security of my children? How does this, et cetera, right?
I love this thinking pattern. Like I go through these 5 steps and
5 plans. That's right.
And I can relate. I'm feeling how to say oriented, like a little map I have now. I see where I'm going. It's really, really good. So
the first mistake, Danish, the first mistake I want to tackle with a plan. Right? When I reach out and I think about it, the first mistake I have is that I consider all of my risk and all of my assets the same. So again, it goes back to that. If I have a cheap bicycle that I'm locking up, but I have a 6-year-old who's wandering in the street, maintaining parity, maintaining the similarity between those assets of risk and reward is silly, right? And normally in life, when we go out of town, my wife gathers up her jewels, all her rings and things and that kind of thing, and ensures everything's all locked up rather than just leaving them in her normal jewel safe or her jewel case that she usually works out of. However, our television and our computers and those kind of things we leave out. We have, in a way, identified in our mind what are our high value assets and what are our lower value assets, right? So in good old Texas strategy, I call this putting the pigs in the pen and putting the cows in the pasture, right? What we're not doing is we're not trying to squeeze all of our cows and our pigs and everything into a pen, because look, the pigs are dirty, the pigs are going to get out. When they get out, they're going to run amok. We got to keep them in a tight pen in the mud where they belong. The cows can wander. The cows can wander in the pasture as long as they're back in by sunset. And so when we think about that sensitive data that we have to protect, if we're constantly stressing out on both of our assets or all of our assets in the same way, things get really expensive, things get really hard, and things also get hard to find, right? If I put everything I owned in a safe every time I wasn't using it, every time I went to go get it, I have to dig through everything trying to find it. And it's the same way in technology, right? If we lock down everything in the exact same way, then we put ourselves in a position of very low productivity and very expensive containers to save things that maybe aren't that valuable.
It's really good. And what type of, how are you going to make decision what you protect and what you don't protect? Do you have any way to select the protectable assets?
Right. So first things we look at when we look at sensitive data to protect, and that's what we do with clients here, is in the sensitive data we look at first what are the compliance requirements that we have? What don't we have a choice in? Because when we think about our security or our risk baseline, we have to think about things in which we can be held accountable by the law or by a regulating board that would take away our license, right? So things like patient information, things like credit card information, things like our employees' information, employee payroll data. This is all stuff that by law, we have a certain level of protection. And so that's the first and easy one. We'll put those pigs right in the pen right away. Now, the next level out, we look at and say, what is our competitive data? What is the data that if we lost it to a competitor or to the general public would either be embarrassing or put our business at risk? And here's where I want businesses really to be honest with themselves. Because if we think about it, I have a lot of enduring photos of my family on my phone that I've taken throughout. They're very precious to me. I don't want to lose any of them. But quite honestly, if the general public was trolling through my pictures of me and my kids climbing in the mountains, I don't have a lot of risk there, right?
Yes.
So I do need to separate this idea of maybe what's sensitive and I need to have highly available so that I don't lose it. But also then what doesn't have a lot of sensitivity that if other eyes saw it, it would be, maybe it's sensitive to you, maybe it's valuable to you, but it's boring to them, right? And so those cows we allow to wander during the day in the pasture, but at night we put them in the barn. And then there are other things in our life that, look, it just doesn't matter, right? So, hey, I've got a utility bill that doesn't have an account number or any other information, but it tells you how much electricity I used in the last month. I don't care, right? And so where that utility bill goes or where other assets of my business, the sales material that I freely give out to everyone anyways, all this material can be material we don't even have to put in the barn at night. So when we divide this information up, regulatory, business sensitive, business critical, and then public, when we divide these pieces up, it not only allows our employees to have better access, right? Why wouldn't all of our employees have access to all of our sales material at any given time with very low entries, very low barrier to them accessing that data? We want to get out of their way and give them access to that sales data. Sales mean revenue. But when it comes to sensitive employee data, payroll data, how many of our employees really need that? So we lock that piece down. And I think what you'll find is, and again, if we're all very honest with ourselves and we look at our data, 10 or maybe 20% of our data is really critical, very sensitive data. And 50 to 80% of our data feels like it might be sensitive, but it's probably just really not that critical, right? And by dividing those pieces up, we can really change the way our security footprint and our productivity around security works.
Because basically what you're saying is that if we identify that 10% of the critical data we want to protect, then it's going to be less productive with working those data. More multi-factor authentication, more steps to give somebody access or revoke the access. It's more headache to manage that security, like locking the door all the time kind of thing, or opening up something like that. But in this case, 90% of the data is free flow, people can leverage, and we actually take the natural risk that if somebody's like stealing that or sharing that or whatever, it's not going to be that critical. We don't like it. We carry the risk, but we can understand that's not going to be lethal to the company or something like that. It's actually really good because it's, I know, like, somebody goes to vacation, give the access, revoke the, it's just a headache, and people keep these. Yeah, I get that. Right.
It's significant, right? And this, Danish, is why we keep our life savings in a bank, and we keep the assets we need to use, even valuable, in our homes every day. And we have a little lock on the door, but we don't have the same level of security that the bank is, because if our houses get cleaned out, it's not the same as if our life savings does, right? And that's what we really are splitting up. That 80, you said 90-10, let's just even get it to 80-20, right? Where 80% of our data is locked up, it has a key on the door, but 20% of our data is the stuff that's in the vault in the bank. And then we operate much differently around our data.
It's basically, it's a common sense if you say that, but I know it's not a common practice. Like, it's like everything is locked
because
down.
We don't break it down that way, right? And that's why I broke down the old Texas sayings here, because the idea of putting the pigs in the pen and the cows out to pasture makes so much sense to everybody. Yeah. Why would you try to put the cows in with the pigs? Like, it wouldn't even make any sense. And in fact, it would really hurt the pigs, and the cows wouldn't like it, and it wouldn't do you any good, right? You're not going to get any more milk that way. And when we break down almost every other analogy in our life, we naturally do this. But when it comes to data, we feel like we don't know enough to do it, even though the data is not technology, it's not cyber. To the most part, it's our business intelligence that we know is separate, right? It's the things that we talk about, we already know. So usually when we break it down to that point and we start making lists and we look at the data, it's very easy for C-level folks to just quickly identify those pieces, move them in the right spot, and then we can really open up access to the information that people need in order to be more productive, the stuff they access all the time.
Paul, anything to share in this first, or we can move to the second part, which is basically how you protect those assets, how you mend your fences?
Yeah, I think that, again, so this one is critical, because every other aspect, every other plan relies on the fact that we've properly identified this data. We've put it in the right spots. And that way we can free up budget, we can free up productivity gains and losses to associate differently. And that's what we'll talk about in the next plan.
All right. So the second plan of productivity is basically mend your fences, to create these boundaries around these assets.
That's right. So when we think about the pigs in the pen or the cows to pasture, we talked about in the first plan. In the second plan, we're going to say, now that we have those assets there, let's take a good hard look at our fences. And let's be real with ourselves and determine, do we have the right fences? Do we have the right amount of fences? We're just going to take a look at that entirely. How is the data split up? Where does it live? And what do we currently have? And not just fences. You know, when I say fences, another big piece that I mean in there, Danish, is gates. Access points in the fence in which we access data. Because here's usually what happens, right? We have a 20-acre farm, so we fence all the way around the outside of it. But we're only working 5 acres of it right now. We got a lot of fence to mend that we're not using. And then a project starts, so we put a gate there. And then another project starts, so we put a gate there. And another project starts, so we put a gate there. And we change our policies and we change our procedures. The next thing you know, you have a gate that you have to protect and mend and lock that you never use anymore. And so when we talk about mending our fences, we're taking that good hard look of what the data looks like that we're building a fence for, right? And sometimes we don't need a fence. Sometimes a cattle guard on the road is all we need to keep the cows at pasture. And we eliminate maintaining the fence altogether. So when we think about mending our fences, I'm talking about making a plan to mend your fences, and then understanding the cost and the implications associated with constantly going back and safeguarding those fences. What's the value? And where are we creating those open doorways, those gateways into your secure areas? And sometimes that means we reduce the area that we fence. Sometimes it means that there are areas that we had fences that we were mending a lot that we get rid of those. Sometimes it means that we had areas that we thought were well fenced that weren't fenced well at all. And in a balanced approach, again, if we really divvy up those pigs in the pen and the cows in the pasture, we should be able to shake loose some of the effort we've been putting in to fence a pasture that didn't need fencing, to keep the pigs in, and put more effort into the pig pen.
Yeah, I would like to ask you something, Paul. That I think it's leave everybody really vividly what happened the first 3 days of COVID-19.
Right.
Everybody ran and went remote. People, we didn't know what to do, where to go, how to
That's
work.
Right.
And like how actually, because that's a vivid memory, I guess, for everybody. But this second plan is like Mend Your Fences. How this would apply to that kind of big disruptive change to manage these fences?
That's right. So when everyone had to leave the ranch, right, and then they needed access through the fence in order to get access to data, right? So everybody went home,
Yes.
and yet we needed to still come to work remotely. And the temptation there was, we got to take down the fence. We got to let people work from home. But then on the other side, it said, oh boy, we've got to fire up security, because if people are working from home, they're not working on work assets anymore, right? They're working on home assets. And we have further exposure that way that we'll talk about here in Plan 3. Which I love that you're getting me there. But in Plan 2, when COVID showed up, I mean, the real goal was that we needed to create a very simple, productive way for people to access the pasture, while maybe not accessing the pig pen, right? And giving people the productivity they needed in that way in a very simple fashion, right? And so driving in and out, maybe instead of replacing the gate, we put the cattle guard in, and cattle guards, the set of bars that you drive across on the road that the cows can't walk over, but the cars can drive through. That keeps the cows where they need to be and allows people to have quick and easy access into the pasture, but without having to have the constant gate in and out access.
Yeah, somehow I feel that when you apply Plan 1 to make sure that you are able to divide on different critical data or normal data, and then apply that, you can't apply the second plan without the second, or like the first, which is interesting.
That's right.
The other thing is, like, it gives you so much flexibility as an executive. Guys, COVID hit, okay, go through quickly, who need what, bang, 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 and that's basically it. It's not like, oh, and you are clueless and you are basically, hey, boss, I need access to this file. Okay, I give it to you. And then 5 minutes later, oh no, I need another, like it. So like complete companies broke down for days because people couldn't actually access basic information outside.
And that's the first 3 days, if I can interrupt. That's the first 3 days.
Yes.
But then 2 weeks later, when everything got quiet, what executives and what security folks started to see was that once they got past that first roar of I need access, then they found all these old gates that were open for different projects that people were using and exploiting that they should never have used in this way, right? And so now, these backdoors, these gates that we didn't even know existed because we didn't have a plan to mend our fences. We didn't have a plan to keep track of these things. Now we have employees using them, and they insist that using only those gates are the key to their productivity. Now I got to take those gates away. It's a significantly different plan. If we had a plan to mend our fences, and we're constantly reviewing and understanding where our gates are and how our fence posture looks, and a COVID-19 emergency comes up, it's easy for us to make sure that certain gates aren't exploited and certain gates are open to ensure that people just have the right amount of access at the right times to the right data.
Perfect. Anything shared to the second, or we can move to the next one?
No, I think I'm very excited about the third one because it flows out of the second into the third the same way the first flows into the second, and that is minding your ranch.
So tell us the secret.
So the third plan of productivity is minding your ranch. So here's the deal. You introduced it a little bit with COVID-19. In minding your ranch, we talk about the productivity of moving things into their own pens. Then we talked about creating fences around those pens. Now, as people show up and they're there to work with you, They want to access that data in new and interesting ways because we have new gateways. We have new fences that we've adjusted. We've created even more productivity for them than ever before. So I want you to think about maybe where things were 5 or 7 years ago. Employees sat at your desk in your office. They worked on your computer, either the company computer, at a company desk, in a company chair. They connected to a company server, and they sent email through, email through a company email server. Now, everything is up in the cloud, and people access it from everywhere. And that can be incredibly productive. But here's a piece that I think we need to remember was at the same time they were sitting at home and they were working on your computer at your desk and they were compartmentalized, is what I like to call that. Compartmentalized and focused in their work. When they went home, they would pull out their iPhone or their iPad or even their computer and they would run a side business. They would pay their bills. They would check Facebook. They would be on Instagram. They would be immersed in sort of the pleasure of their lives. And if if screen time can tell us anything, people probably, at the immersion of this accessibility of cloud data, probably for a short period of time there, when they were locked into their computer at work and they had their phone at home, they spent more time playing on their phone at home than they did working on your computer at work. Now, as these devices come together, what you're asking that employee to do is take that phone or that iPad out. And even though they're more used to playing on that device than working on it, keep them focused and have them work on it. It's not fair. It's not fair to the employee. It's a loaded game. The distractions are immense, and your employees don't know how to handle it. So when they come to work on your ranch, you've got to mind your ranch. You've got to say, hey, this is a work ranch, and we get things done here. And if we don't take care of the animals, if we don't take care of the work, we don't get paid. The customers aren't happy, and none of this comes together, right? And so in that next step, we've given our employees just the data they need. We've made it available to them by using the right fences. And now we're creating rules, policies, and procedures that allow customer or employees to understand, hey, how do I stay focused and productive in this new environment? And that, if we don't do that, then the mix of play and business will open up new security concerns that we never had before.
That's really, yeah, I have 4 kids, Paul, and when this whole thing came up, like we need to get around like 4 computers for them because like they couldn't share because they had to like do the classes, whatever. So obviously they were like jumping in my computer or my wife's computer easily. And like, like I had to create like different profiles for them and things. It wasn't really a simple task to separate the company environment, and they were like clicking all over the place. And like, I started seeing like TikTok things on my YouTube stuff, like, because they were starting clicking there and like, come on, like what else? Right. So it's security, productivity, distraction, everything in one, which is actually totally, it really makes hard to work from home or work from, a coffee shop if you are not focused and things like that. So I really get your point here. And if I would have some sort of rules how to do that, that would be so much easier to follow something, at least because it wasn't my intention to kind of get all over the place. Yeah.
That's right. And so we do, from a productivity standpoint, there are technical tools that we can put in place that don't just lock people out of things. Again, the first gut reaction of security is it's there to just get in our way and lock us out of doing things. That's not it at all. Instead, if we want to help create focused places for people, we can use technologies that allow them to have a work desktop inside of their home desktop. So if it's work, it stays inside a work desktop. If it's home, it stays inside a home desktop. When you leave for the day, when you leave work for the day, you close the work desktop and you use as much TikTok as you want, and it doesn't get in. Nobody knows back at work, and it keeps your home life private, right? If I'm searching for medicine or searching for other things online and I'm getting cookies, I don't want those coming back up into my work stream and work profile and being exposed to those. If I'm searching on Indeed for a new job, I don't want that to be coming through right. I mean, these are some of these things that we are respecting the employee's privacy. We're not getting in their way. But when they're doing work for us, when they're working on the ranch, they're going to take off their tennis shoes and they're going to put on their boots. And we're making that very clear because ranch work is ranch work and homework is homework, right? And we're giving them the tools they need to do that. It's just not fair to the employees to tell them to show up to work, they get to work on the ranch, they're wearing tennis shoes because that's all they know, and then we march them through the mud, right? It just is not a fair thing to do to the employees. It's not effective for us, and productivity suffers. But by identifying the need and giving just the right tools so they can change out of their home tennis shoes and put on their work boots, we take care of the problem. And it's not a big investment. We're not talking about buying them their own ranch. We're not talking about buying them their own truck. We're talking about a set of boots. And these are the small changes we can make in minding our ranch that keep our employees focused, happy, and create that sense of work-life balance that means that when they're at work, they're working, and when they're at home, they're home.
Paul, I think I had an aha moment here, because it is totally new for me that like a policy and procedure actually good for an employee. It was kind of in my mind, it's, yeah, regulation, whatever, big companies, the CEO needs that for, no, it's actually, your point is really valid. Like, if you don't have any game plan or, any rules of the game, nobody can really play well because they don't know how to do that. And policies and this little internal compliance can actually really help people to, okay, can I do Facebook? Can I do Instagram? How can I do that? Whatever. It's just like makes so much sense. And actually you are keeping productivity and be more security because these are along those lines. So really,
and you're right on, right? Now that we've talked about minding our own ranch and giving them the tools they need, you're walking us right into the fourth plan, which is teaching them how to fish, right? Teaching them understanding. So I'm excited. I'm very excited, Anish, in your aha moment that leads us right from one right into the other, which is plan 4, teach them how to fish.
Yeah, and I think honestly, for this teaching part is like that's the fourth plan of yours, and I think
That's
people
right.
start here, and I understand why teaching doesn't really work.
That's right. So again, when we're teaching them how to fish, right? Plan 4 for productivity, teach them how to fish. You saw, just as we walked through this, and your aha moments and everything you got, plan 1 was our responsibility. Plan 2, our responsibility. Plan 3, empowering our employees. Now, plan 4 is where we ask our employees for responsibility, right? And we don't come to them until we're ready. Because in the absence of that, it falls apart, right? In the absence of that, it feels to the employees like, hey, I want you to dig this hole, but you can't have a shovel. And you have to stand on one foot. And oh, by the way, you can only do it when there's a full moon. I mean, they just shut us off and they work around us, right? And that's what's critical. When I talk about the fourth plan for productivity, and people say, when do I train my employees? Or when do I educate my employees? I throw that out of the window. And the reason I use the term teach them to fish is this idea of give a man a fish, he eats for the day, teach a man to fish, and he eats forever, right? The whole team, your whole team has to come to this understanding of the why around security. And if all we teach them is don't go here, don't go there, don't use that gate, don't wear those tennis shoes, if they don't get that backstory, that why on security, then they'll always be looking over their shoulder to see if somebody's watching, right? They will spend more time learning how to not work in security than they will on how they will work in security. And this is where, if we can get, the first step is we teach them how to understand where the security, the why, the background of this thing, so that they really feel it, right? They understand the risks involved. They understand the problem associated. And they know that they are part of the problem and that they can be part of the solution. Once we establish that, and then we bring it up to an importance level that, hey, as long as security isn't attacked, as long as security is left at bay, as long as security isn't aside, then everything else you're working on could fall apart. It's that important. So security isn't part of what we do as the business. It's in everything we do as the business. Everything we look at, everything we touch, everything we feel should be divided up, should be protected, should be made available in the correct ways, and should be divided between work and home life. And once they get that good feeling, then if we do this just right,
Yeah.
now every one of those employees will start to preach security and start to self-enforce, right? They'll start asking people, hey, why are you copying data off of out of that data repository? Hey, why are you moving things over here when you know that you shouldn't? Hey, because they are your ambassadors. They understand the impact of security on their own productivity. And when other employees are out there and they're acting in a way that doesn't comply with what they're learning, it starts to feel like a personal attack because they're invested. And that teaching, that education to those employees is just so critical in that way, right? It's not just how to do my job, it's why security is part of everything you do. And it's no different. It's no different than when we teach our kids to walk safely to the neighbor's house. My kids want to be able to walk down the street to the neighbor's house. We have to go through security on the street. We have to go through security of strangers. We have to go through security of texting mom and dad when you get there. I mean, all the things that you would normally cover are part of a trip to the neighbor's house. They aren't side things that we think about doing maybe after we're done playing.
That's a really good point. I'll give you an example. We are using LastPass as a software tool for managing passwords inside in our home, so with the family members. And I had a little exercise with my teenage daughter to start, and this LastPass software has a feature which is checking all your accounts and measuring where you have duplicate passwords, where your password is weak, and things like that. And it gives you a score. It gives you a 0 to 100 score, how you are performing, kind of thing. And what was really interesting is that when I show them, like, they were like, yeah, whatever. They didn't like teaching without the context. And when we gone through a little exercise on like what matters and they were really getting engaged to actually increase this point. So the education is not like lecturing and tell them what to do kind of thing, giving them like, because when they motivated and they understand why they need to increase the score to do that, it's kind of fun and go and, you know, check passwords and money. It's not a big deal if they understand that it matters. So I really feel that, you know, teach them to fish rather than just giving them, okay, like I walk you through how to change 2 passwords. No, give them something which they can use later to make sure they can manage themselves, manage their risks, understand where they are. And the same things come up, like 2 or 3 or 4 items. Like, we don't care, those websites, they can have they can hack it, who cares, because it just doesn't have any more information than our emails, right? But there are stuff which has to be super protected, like your email, things like that, because that's the source of that. It's really helpful.
And when you show all this work that we've done, we created and executed the first plan.
Yes.
We created and maintained a second plan. We created and maintained a third plan that has given them tools to make their life better. And now on the fourth plan, all we're asking is for them to help. Right? You know, I mean, I think about the federal government's response to security in airplanes or against domestic terrorism, and they come up with this saying, see something, say something, right? Everyone's part of the solution. Everyone's the eyes here on security. Everyone's keeping the homeland safe. But I will say, from your last pass example, what I love about that is, once again, we talk about creating evangelical people who are super excited about preaching the gospel of security. Yeah. And then you talked about a score. And the fifth plan of productivity that I introduced here is what I like to call paint the town and the front porch. So it is, once we learn how to fish, once we have all the plans in place, how do we stand up and shout it from the mountaintops that we are so excited that we are all on the same path, and that we have great visibility that everyone else is following the same rules and everyone else on our team is a participant in this, right? So, so in our fifth plan for productivity, paint the town and the front porch too, we want to make this wide open in public. It's no longer an individual employee training. It's no longer employees sitting on videos. It's no longer one-to-one manager to employee discussions. We gave them time. We created the rules with our first 2 plans. We gave them the tools with our 3rd plan. Then we told them the why. We gave them all dialed in for our 4th plan. And now on our 5th plan, we're making it public. Here are the people who are in compliance. Here are the people from a security standpoint that have the best score. Here are the people who have a great security habit. Here are the people that are doing a great job. And by doing that, by creating a very public environment of scrutiny amongst security, then if I want to skirt security or work around it, I'm worried that just being the oddball, just being the one guy who has a low security score, just being the one guy who's taking advantage of not following security starts to make me feel like the lesser, right? And in doing that, I'm so cautious about making sure that I'm toeing the line, making sure that I'm doing my part, that every security bit that I'm doing is becoming a habit. Because not only do I have the why, but now I have the need to fit in. The why, the need to fit in creates a habit. And now, when I get in my car, I don't even think about the seatbelt, because I've got the habit is connected to the car, right? And if we can't get to that very public feel of putting on a seatbelt when you get in the car that creates that solid habit. If we can't get there, then every employee movement is sort of an extra step or an extra disruption. Employees are bumping into each other. But now, because it's public, because it's monitored, because it's not just like let me just be really clear. It's not some sort of secret monitoring of employees to find out if they're behaving. Instead, it's a public monitoring. And here's the thing, not only does that get you that great score, but it also means that we can celebrate winners. When you said you had the best score at your house, we can take employees that have the best security score and we can publicly give them a bonus. We can publicly give them a high five. We can give them an award. We can use it for recognition. And this just becomes part of our culture of celebration around keeping our jobs, our customers, and our shareholders safe. And that's a big win. I mean, I love the idea of security not only becoming productive, but also something that we can cut a cake around, right? And just paint the front porch. I mean, it's a celebration.
Let me inject my little story here about our bicycle theft. Because interestingly, what you said was in that part, the 5th plan is basically close the loop and make it part of the culture. So basically, you are making a cybersecurity culture in the organization, which is really, really a big deal. Paul, it's really a big deal. And I see, like, if you are missing 2nd or 3rd, it's just falling apart, and it's ridiculed, right? But like after this bicycle theft, whenever we go somewhere away from the camper, the trailer, one of the kids asking, did you lock the bicycles? That's the part of our culture now in the family. I love it. Which is not really good in Canada because we don't expect that, right? But you know, we had to have like conversations with them, like how this is working or things like that. But they are really diligent on that. Like, if we don't have the lock, somebody's like watching the bikes until we are doing something like shopping or whatever. So it's part of the culture. So I'm not worried if I forget anything, somebody's going to remind me. That's the teamwork. That's the win. That's the habit on that 5th plan. It's really make a ton of sense, honestly, because it's just like down to earth, and that's put everything together. So I would like you to ask a big favor here, is that can you just walk us through in a minute or two on the complete concept, because I think it's really, really getting together, and I wanna hear from the beginning to the end how these 5 things are getting together.
That sounds great. So if I have to button it all up, here's what I would say. When it comes to security, a lot of folks come to me and say it's too hard or it's scary, when the bottom line is those folks just have too much slack in their rope. They think they're making room for productivity, but they're actually making things difficult. Folks need to tackle problem head on with these 5 critical plans. First, they're going to stop treating all data the same. They're going to make a plan to categorize data, then they're going to put those pigs in a pen, and they're going to put the cows out to pasture. Second, they're going to remember that they're keeping not just the bad out, but the good in. And they're going to take a look at their fences, and they're going to make some hard calls about how they're going to have the right fences and the right gates, and how they're going to keep those fences and gates safe in the future. Third, they're going to mind their ranch. So I bet that some people spend more time on their devices playing than working. In fact, probably more people than not. And we need a plan to keep the employees from getting distracted. We need to help them do a great job and maintain productivity in a world that wants to distract them in an unfair way. Fourth, you want your folks to eat, and you got to teach them to fish. So you need a plan not just to teach them how to fish, but to make them into fishermen, proud fishermen who want to show everyone who comes to the shore how to fish. And the last and fifth plan is that rules aren't enough. You need a plan to paint the town and the front. You need a plan to paint the town and the front porch, to expose failures and to celebrate wins publicly. With those 5 plans in place and well executed in your organization, I am confident that you will turn your organization into a culture that values security and finds security as a tool that increases productivity rather than hinder.
Holy smokes, that is good. That is like cybersecurity in a nutshell, in a minute explained. Paul, I'm really grateful that we had you today, and what I can tell to the listeners is that Digital Maturity Group and the advisors like Paul made a ton of work to actually make this available for you in a form of benchmark. So if you feel that I'm not sure about the security in my organization, I'm not sure about productivity, let's go and sign up for this digital maturity benchmark, which is helping you to understand where you are, what's your bottlenecks, and as an executive or an owner of a small business, like make sure it's demystified. Digital transformation is happening. We are not using fax machines anymore. Every organization is going through this digital transformation, and the question is who is going to go through faster and with more productivity. And that's our mission with Digital Maturity Group, to make this digital transformation simple. So don't hesitate, go there, go to the website. We have many videos, assets to look, and advice like from Paul is just worth thousands of consulting hours, and I'm getting these free consulting from you guys. Awesome, because these are like big deals. Most of the consultants we see are trying to overcomplicate things, trying to make sure you understand that they are doing something, and these are down to earth stuff. This is not that shouldn't be that difficult. So Paul, thank you very much again for your wisdom here. And guys, again, go and sign up for any of these materials and go through the benchmark. Thank you very much. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Danish. Take care.